This morning, closing arguments will continue in the manslaughter trial of Daniel Penny. Prosecutors are expected to wrap up their case today, and after that, his fate lies in the hands of the jury. Penny's charged in the fatal chokehold death of Jordan Neely in an incident on a New York City subway train last year. If he is convicted on the second-degree manslaughter charge, Penny could face up to 15 years in prison. Now, in court yesterday, the defense wrapped their closing arguments, saying in part, arguing that Daniel Penny put his own life at risk to protect other riders. Also telling the jury that prosecutors, this coming from the defense, prosecutors are scapegoating this man here. The only guy who was brave enough to stand up when he was needed. The government wasn't there. The police weren't there when the people needed help. Danny was. And when he was the one who needed help, no one was there. Joining us right now, trial and defense attorney Misty Marris. And prosecution is now going to be picking up with their arguments, closing arguments today. But let's stick on what we heard from the defense team yesterday. You heard that scapegoating argument that as part of their closing argument. They also made another argument in closings. I want to read you a quote from it, Misty. That basically that Penny's actions were justified because he was acting to protect other people. Here's what they told the jury. Daniel Penny was the one who moved to protect them. Why? Because he had something the others didn't, something unique to him, his training, because Danny acted to save those people. And there's no dispute that when Danny acted, he didn't know whether Jordan Neely was armed. Add it all together, Misty, what do you make of the defense's closing argument?
So the defense was focused on exactly what they needed to be. So part of the defense is that it's a self-defense argument, not just self-defense for Daniel Penny, self-defense of the others on that train. And part of that argument has to reflect what we know is going to be on that jury verdict sheet. First, was there an imminent threat? So the defense pointed to others on the train who had said that they were fearful. Then, was Penny's response justified and proportionate to that threat? And that's why we hear the defense talking about the fact that Daniel Penny stepped in when there was nobody else to do so, and that his actions were justified because he did not know whether or not Neely was going to get back up and go back on the offensive. Now, couple that with another point that the defense pointed out that Neely's death is the product of a broken system. That's a quote from the closing arguments. And they loop that back into the testimony because the final defense witness was a court clerk who referenced that Neely, there was actually an open bench warrant for his arrest. So essentially the defense is arguing almost that the city of New York really failed Neely and that Penny was there when the city of New York was not there, when nobody was there to protect those other riders. So that's where the defense was focused because that's the standard of the self-defense statute.
I see. The prosecution, again, continues with closing today. Yesterday, as part of it, they did concede that there was initial reason for Penny to restrain Neely, but then continuing with the argument that he took it too far, continuing the chokehold even after a reasonable person could see that the threat was over. What do you think of the prosecution's case and what they want to leave with the jury now?
So this was always going to be where the prosecution was focused, right from the get-go. Even the opening statements, Kate, the prosecutors had to concede that the initial restraint of Neely was justified, and that's because there were many others on the train who said they were fearful. It's a reasonable person standard. So if others were fearful, it's reasonable that Penny would ultimately step in. But the issue is whether or not it was justified to hold Neely down for that almost 6-minute time period. And prosecutors focused on the fact that in less than a minute, the train pulled into the next station. Most of the people got off the train. So basically the threat at that point was over, and that holding down Neely for the remainder of that time was actually a failure on Penny's part to recognize Neely's humanity and that he needed protection as well. So that was a large part of the prosecution's argument because the standard is reckless disregard for human life. Now, the prosecutors pointed to Daniel Penny's interrogation video, which, by the way, he was there voluntarily. So he spoke to police voluntarily, and he called Neely a crackhead multiple times. So prosecutors are painting the picture that, yes, Daniel Penny may have been justified at the get-go, but at some point, his conduct turned criminal. And the next part of this, Kate, it's going to be a large focus today. It's going to be the medical aspect. The medical examiners determination that Neely was killed by Penny's chokehold and his chokehold alone, no other causes.
Yeah, as defense was trying to bring the other causes into their case as well. Misty, thank you so much for putting it all together. Let's see what happens today and how quickly this then gets to the jury. Really appreciate it. John?